The marker squeaked, then fell silent. Inside the glass-walled boardroom at aerospace headquarters in Lagos, tension hung like heavy smoke. On the whiteboard, a sketch of a plane sat buried under a storm of wrong answers. Lines crossed lines, arrows fought arrows, numbers clashed in confusion. At the head of the table stood Johnson Uche, billionaire CEO of aerospace, gripping the polished wood with both hands. His eyes were wet, his voice rough with despair. "We have 48 hours, he said, the words trembling in the air. "If we fail again, we lose the contracts, we lose everything." The room of top engineers froze, no one dared to speak. It felt like a bad dream where escape was impossible. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound. Then, from the doorway, a voice broke through, low, steady, and completely out of place. "I can correct it." Every head turned. By the door stood a man in his early 40s. His coat was tattered, his shoes dusty, his beard was unkempt, his hair rough, his entire presence out of step with the sleek boardroom. He clutched a tired brown bag to his chest as if it contained treasure. Security moved instantly, stepping forward to remove him, but Johnson raised a hand. "Wait," the stranger's eyes were calm, they didn't flinch or wander. He looked at the failed drawing of the plane as though he recognized an old friend who had lost its way. "I can correct it," he said again. The room stiffened. The engineers exchanged whispers. Who was this ragged man? How did he even get past security? But Johnson, his nerves worn thin, felt something in the quiet conviction of the man's voice. "What did you say?" Johnson asked, his voice soft but sharp as glass. "I can correct it. Let me try." The boardroom erupted in murmurs. One young engineer scoffed. "What could he possibly know that we don't?" Another muttered under her breath, "This is madness." But Johnson, weary from failures that weighed like stones, slid the marker across the table. His words came out heavy but steady. "If you waste our time, you waste my company. Don't waste it." The room fell into stunned silence. The stranger walked forward. He smelled of dust and sun and old paper. He didn't introduce himself, didn't clear his throat, didn't try to impress. He simply took the marker, faced the whiteboard, and stood still for 3 long seconds. Then he moved. He erased 2 furious arrows that crossed each other like enemies on the wing. He drew a single clean line, soft and steady, like a river finding its course. He circled a small box labeled "AI" and wrote beside it, "Sensor drift under vibration." His hand moved quickly, sure of itself, adding 3 short equations, no more than needed, just enough to light a path. He wrote "feedback loop overreacts," then he underlined it once, and then, almost strangely, he drew a small smiley face near the tail of the plane. Not as a joke, not even for charm, but as though to remind the plane where peace should live. "What are you saying?" one of the engineers asked, his voice half curious, half doubtful. The stranger turned. His words came simple, clear. "When the plane feels many small shakes, this little sensor." He tapped the AOA box, believes the nose is too high, it panics. The autopilot pushes the nose down too fast. The pilots fight it. It becomes a tug-of-war. A few seconds of wrong numbers can turn into a fall. He drew a tiny filter on the board like a sieve. "We slow the panic with this filter. The sensor listens better. Then we teach it to check 2 helpers before it acts." He marked 2 points on the drawing, airspeed and vertical speed. If all 3 agree, it acts. If one shouts alone, it waits. The boardroom leaned forward, silence deepening into something alive. He wrote 3 steps on the side, filter the noise, cross-check the helpers, soft hands on the nose. "Soft hands," he repeated. The phrase seemed strange at first, but it rang with a quiet truth. The room, once filled with doubt, shifted. Chairs moved closer, pens stopped tapping. Even the air conditioner's hum seemed to fade into listening. Johnson stepped forward. What is your name?" The man didn't turn from the board. "Williams," he said simply. "My name is Williams. And where did you learn this?" Johnson pressed, his voice quieter now, edged with wonder. Williams touched the pocket of his coat, where the edge of his old book pressed against his ribs. From before, from work, from mistakes, from watching the sky and listening when numbers got scared. The senior engineer finally broke her silence. We tried a filter last week. It helped in small shakes, but during stronger ones, the system still fought the pilots. Yes. Williams nodded, drawing another sketch. A small box, labeled human, override with time gate. Give the pilot the stronger voice early, not after the fight begins. Let the system learn calm from the pilot, but only after it sees it twice. The machine must not be proud. That last line stirred a ripple of surprise, even a few smiles. Proud? Someone repeated, almost amused. Williams nodded once. Yes, the system must not be proud. The engineers fell silent again, but it was no longer the silence of disbelief. It was the silence of doors unlocking. Johnson straightened, his tired eyes shining. Build a quick sim, he ordered. Use his steps, we run it now. The team leapt into motion, laptops opened, fingers flew. The projector hummed to life, casting a digital runway across the glass wall. The model plane appeared, waiting for judgment. As they worked, Johnson moved closer to Williams. You said your name is Williams. Williams what? Williams did not look away from the board. Williams Andrew. Johnson studied him closely, seeing the depth in his tired eyes that had seen both fire and silence, both joy and ruins. Where do you stay? He asked softly. Williams's grip tightened on the marker. His voice did not waver. Under the bridge, the room, alive with numbers and simulation codes, froze for just a moment. The ragged man with the dusty coat, the man from the shadows of Lagos, had walked in to correct what the best minds had failed to fix. And now, all of aerospace held its breath, waiting to see if he was right. The simulation began like a heartbeat. The plane rose into the digital sky, wings stretching, nose lifting. For a moment, everything was calm. Then turbulence, the airspeed needle twitched, the sensors shook like frightened hands. The old system had always panicked here. But this time, the line on the screen smoothed, the nose held steady, the autopilot paused, listened, then acted gently. The boardroom leaned forward in unison. Again, stronger turbulence. Again, the system held, and when it began to slip, the pilot's input cut through. Swift, clear, respected. The machine yielded without a fight. A cheer rose. Hands clapped the table. Even the most skeptical engineers couldn't hide their awe. For the first time in weeks, hope filled the room. Johnson Uche didn't cheer. He turned to Williams. His eyes held something heavier than excitement recognition. You just saved this company, Johnson said quietly. The words landed in the room like a verdict, but Williams only lowered his eyes. I only helped the plane breathe. Later, when the others left to prepare for deeper tests, Johnson called Williams aside. They sat across from each other in the now quiet boardroom, the whiteboard still carrying Williams's clean lines and quiet, smiley face. You said you live under a bridge, Johnson began carefully. Williams nodded. His voice was calm, but his shoulders carried the weight of a buried past. Yes, why? Williams's eyes drifted to the whiteboard, then to the floor. For a long while he said nothing. Then softly, because I once trusted the wrong men. Johnson leaned back, listening. I was an aeronautical engineer. Williams continued, the words pulled like stones from a deep well. Worked in the United States. I loved the sky. I believed the sky had no enemies, only mistakes to be corrected. But men can be crueler than any turbulence. His hands tightened into fists, then slowly unclenched. There was a project, a flight system. I warned them about a flaw. They called me arrogant. When it failed, they turned on me, said it was my fault. The company framed me, and the courts believed them. I lost everything. My name, my work, my papers. They deported me, and Lagos became my exile. He breathed deeply, steady but weary. I came back with nothing, no family waiting, no home, only a book of my notes and the sky above. I slept under the bridge. The world forgot me. The room felt smaller. The hum of the city beyond the glass walls seemed far away. Johnson's voice came slow and deliberate. "But today the world remembers you." Williams looked up, his eyes uncertain, almost afraid to believe. Johnson stood. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, commanding. He walked to the glass wall and stared out at the Lagos skyline, bright lights, restless traffic, endless ambition. Then he turned back. "You don't belong under a bridge. You belong here. Aerospace needs you. Nigeria needs you and the sky. You belong to the sky, Williams." Williams blinked, fighting a swell of emotions he hadn't felt in years. "I don't even have a shirt without holes," he whispered. Johnson's mouth curved into something between a smile and a vow. "Then tonight you will. Tomorrow you'll wear a suit. And from this day forward, you are no longer a man under a bridge. You are lead engineer at Aerospace." The words hit Williams like thunder. He opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. He saw in Johnson's eyes no pity, no charity, only recognition, the kind given from one warrior to another. And so it began. That evening, Johnson took him personally to a boutique. The staff stared at the ragged man their boss escorted inside, but said nothing. They measured him, fitted him with crisp white shirts, deep blue suits, polished shoes that shone like forgotten stars. When Williams looked at his reflection in the mirror, he barely recognized the man standing there. No dust, no rags, no shadow of a bridge. Just the faint trace of an old scar by his temple, and eyes that carried storms. The next morning, he walked into Aerospace headquarters not as a beggar, not as a ghost, but as lead engineer Williams Andrew. His ID card hung on his chest. His colleagues turned to look, whispers chasing him down the hall. Some smiled with respect. Others frowned with doubt. One pair of eyes, however, burned with a darker fire. Abina Okoye, the former lead engineer, sat stiff at his desk, his jaw tight, his stare sharp as a blade. He watched Williams walk past in his new suit, carrying the authority Abina once claimed as his own. And in that moment, while the company cheered their savior, while Johnson Uche gained a brother in arms, a seed of jealousy rooted itself deep in Abina's heart. The stranger had left the bridge for the boardroom, but every rise carries its shadow. Weeks passed, and Williams Andrew's name spread through the corridors of Aerospace like a quiet flame that refused to die out. He was not a man of many words, but when he spoke, the room listened. His ideas came not as grand speeches, but as sharp truths, simple as bread, strong as iron. Where others drew walls of equations to prove brilliance, Williams wrote only what was needed, lines and notes that carried meaning beyond numbers. He had the strange gift of making machines seem human, of speaking to systems as though they were nervous children needing patience. Soon, the engineers who once doubted him came to respect him. Some even began to admire him, not just for his knowledge, but for his humility. He never raised his voice, never demanded recognition. He worked as though he had nothing to prove, perhaps because he had already lost everything once. But admiration has a way of drawing envy from dark corners. At his desk, Abina Okoye watched with burning eyes. Once he had been the star, the lead engineer, the man everyone looked to. Now he was a shadow, his pride wounded by the rise of a man he considered an outsider, a beggar dressed in borrowed suits. Every laugh Williams shared with colleagues was a dagger in Abina's chest. Every nod of approval from Johnson Uche was salt on his pride. And when Johnson once called Williams the backbone of Aerospace, Abina's hands clenched so tightly around his pen that it snapped in two. Hatred had found its home, but where hate brewed in silence, love blossomed quietly in another corner. Her name was Juliana. She worked in the accounting department, a woman with kind eyes and a smile that could ease the weight of a storm. She had noticed Williams from the first day he stepped into the company in his new suit, shoulders still heavy with a past that clung like smoke. It wasn't his title or his sudden rise that drew her. It was the way he carried himself, the way he said thank you. Even to the janitors, the way he paused to help a junior staff solve a simple calculation instead of brushing them aside. One evening, as the office emptied, Juliana found him alone at the whiteboard, sketching out a design. His suit jacket hung loosely on the chair, his tie undone, his sleeves rolled up. He was humming faintly, almost absent-mindedly, as though the rhythm helped him think. She stood at the door for a moment, watching. "That song," she said softly, surprising even herself. "It sounds old." Williams turned, startled, then smiled faintly. "It is. My mother used to sing it. I don't even know if it has a name, it just stayed." Juliana stepped closer, her eyes drifting to the board. "You never stop, do you? Always thinking, always fixing." He gave a small shrug. "The sky doesn't stop. Why should I?" There was a silence between them, but it was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of recognition, two souls meeting halfway. Days turned into weeks, and the silences grew into conversations. They shared coffee during breaks, laughter over small mistakes, quiet talks about books and music. Williams, who had lived years in the cold company of loneliness, felt something warming in his chest, a light he thought had long gone out. It wasn't long before he knew Juliana wasn't just kind, she was home. One evening, under the orange glow of the Lagos sunset, Williams took her hand as they walked out of the building together. His voice trembled slightly, but his words were steady. "I have nothing to give you but myself. My past is broken, my name almost lost. But if you will have me, I will spend my life proving that love can rebuild anything." Juliana's eyes filled with quiet tears. She squeezed his hand. "I don't need your past, Williams. I need your future." And so, a ring was bought. A promise was made. A wedding was planned. But while love lit one path, jealousy darkened another. Abina, his pride now a festering wound, found company in shadows. In a dimly lit bar by the waterside, he met a man whose name carried whispers and fear, Django, a gangster known for his ruthless hands and cold eyes. Abina leaned forward, his voice thick with venom. "I want him gone. Williams Andrew. He took my place, my respect, my life. I want it back." Django smirked, lighting a cigarette, the glow sharp in the dark. "And what price are you willing to pay for revenge?" Abina's eyes burned with desperation. "Anything." The deal was struck, and while Williams prepared for his wedding, his heart full of hope and love, Abina prepared a different kind of gift, one written in blood and betrayal. The sky above Lagos was clear that night, but storm clouds gathered unseen. The mansion was quiet, wrapped in the calm of night. The wedding was only hours away. Garlands of white and gold flowers already lined the halls, and the air carried the faint sweetness of perfume left by Juliana's bridal fittings earlier in the day. Williams Andrew stood by the wide glass window of his bedroom, staring at the Lagos skyline. The city lights blinked like restless stars, but his mind was still. For the first time in years, peace rested inside him. Tomorrow he would marry Juliana. Tomorrow he would finally begin a new life, far from the bridge, far from the shadows of betrayal. He whispered a quiet prayer to the sky, then he turned, and in that moment the silence shattered. A crash of glass, a shadow moved, the glint of a barrel in the dark. The gunshot thundered through the mansion. Williams staggered back, pain exploding in his chest. His knees buckled, the world spinning into red and black. His body hit the marble floor, blood spilling like a dark flower beneath him. Outside, the guards rushed. Inside, the attackers moved with ruthless precision. But fate is not always loyal to violence. One bullet missed, striking the chandelier, shattering glass across the room. The noise lit the house with chaos. Juliana's scream cut through the air as she burst into the room, her bridal gown still in her arms from fitting. She dropped it, running to Williams. "No, no, no, stay with me, please." Her hands pressed against his wound, her tears falling hot onto his face. Williams tried to speak, but his voice was only a whisper. "Juliana, forgive me." Then his eyes closed. The mansion roared alive. Guards exchanged gunfire with the intruders. Tires screeched outside as the attackers fled into the night. When the dust settled, Williams was rushed to the hospital, Juliana's hands still stained with his blood. For 3 days, Lagos held its breath. Would the man who rose from under the bridge now fall again, this time into the grave? Juliana never left his side. She prayed by his bed, her head bowed, whispering words of love to a man who hovered between two worlds. Johnson Uche came each day, his face hardened not just by grief, but by rage. On the 4th night, as the machines beeped steady but weak, Williams stirred. His eyelids fought to open. The world returned in fragments, light, shadow, Juliana's hand in his, the sound of her sobs turning into gasps of relief. He lived. The hospital became a fortress overnight. Security was tightened. Investigations began. Johnson demanded answers, and answers came swiftly. The CCTV footage from the mansion revealed faces. One in particular froze everyone who saw it. Abina Akoy. The once respected engineer had been caught on camera, slipping into the compound hours before the attack, his car waiting in the shadows. His betrayal was no longer rumor, it was truth. The police moved fast. Abina was dragged from his hiding place and thrown into court. The evidence was heavy, undeniable. He had conspired with Django, paying him to take Williams's life. The trial was swift, the sentence was brutal, 20 years in prison. But when the gavel struck and the guards moved to drag him away, Abina twisted in his chains, his eyes wild, his voice sharp enough to cut stone. "This isn't the end, Williams," he shouted. "You may have won today, but I will return. I will return, and you will beg for mercy." His laughter echoed through the courtroom, chilling even the hardest hearts. Juliana clung to Williams as they walked out together, his body still weak but alive. She whispered, "Forget him, forget the hate, we have each other now." Williams kissed her hand gently. "Yes, we have love, and love is stronger than bullets." But even as he said it, a shadow lingered in his heart. For he knew that hate, once planted, does not die so easily. It waits, it grows, and somewhere in the darkness, Django still walked free. The wedding was delayed but not destroyed. Weeks later, Williams stood tall at the altar, Juliana by his side, her smile brighter than any jewel. Their vows were not just promises of love, but declarations of survival. The applause that followed carried not just joy, but triumph, the triumph of a man who had refused to be buried by betrayal. Yet as he held his bride, Williams Andrew felt a truth deep in his bones. His battles were not over. The bullet had missed his heart, but the war for his future had only just begun. The day of the wedding finally came. The church glowed with white roses and golden light. Friends, colleagues, and strangers who had once doubted Williams filled the pews, waiting for the man who had risen from under a bridge to the heights of honor. When the doors opened, Juliana walked down the aisle in a gown that seemed woven from the very light of morning. Williams stood at the altar, his suit tailored, his scars hidden beneath his shirt but alive in his eyes. As their hands met, the silence in the room was filled with something greater than applause. Faith, hope, and a deep respect for a love born in struggle. "I promise to stand with you," Juliana whispered as she slid the ring onto his finger, "and I promise to rise with you, even when the world tries to drag us down," Williams replied. The vows sealed not just a marriage, but a victory. The celebration that followed was like a festival. Laughter rang in the air, music flowed through the night, and for once, Williams allowed himself to dance freely. The man who once walked barefoot on broken concrete now moved across polished marble with his bride in his arms. Months later, joy blossomed again. Juliana gave birth to a son. Tiny hands, a soft cry, and eyes that blinked like new stars. They named him Clinton. When Williams first held him, tears slipped down his cheeks, unashamed. "This," he whispered, "is why I survived." The mansion that had once echoed with gunfire now echoed with a baby's laughter. The man who once slept under the bridge now rocked his son to sleep in a home filled with warmth. Johnson Uche, proud as a brother, stood as godfather, smiling at the family he had helped rebuild. But peace, no matter how strong, always has shadows. Abina sat behind prison walls, his hands gripping the bars, his eyes sharp as knives. His hatred had not cooled, it had sharpened. And though locked away, whispers spread that Django still roamed the city, a free man, loyal to no law but his own hunger for chaos. Williams felt it. He could not see the shadows, but he could sense them circling, waiting for the moment when his guard would drop. At night, when the house fell quiet, he would walk to the balcony, Clinton asleep in Juliana's arms inside, and look up at the stars. The true battle, he murmured to himself, is not against the enemies outside. It is against fear, doubt, and the storms inside the heart. If I can win there, then nothing, no bullet, no betrayal, can bring me down. The wind carried his words into the night, a vow to himself, to his family, and to the sky that had always watched him. Williams Andrew had risen from the dust, had fought death, had found love, and had become a father. But he knew his story was not finished. Life would test him again, and when it did, he would be ready. For the man who once lived under the bridge now lived under the sky, and the sky, vast and endless, had no end to its battles.